Disclaimer. While we do create family content, this video is not for consumers under the age of 13. If you are under the age of 13, click away now. It's been almost a year since the remake of Resident Evil 2 was released. You may be asking yourself, why is he just now reviewing this title? And I do have an answer for you. But before we get into that, let's get the formalities out of the way. Hey guys, I'm Obi from ObSobe Gaming, and today we will be doing a review of Resident Evil 2 Remake and discussing some major differences from the original title and talking about why, until now, I refuse to pick up this title. So if you have not picked up your copy of the game for the same reason that I will be discussing later on in this video, then you're going to want to stick this video out until the end. I think you'll be surprised by my outcome. For the best quality, I recommend that you use a headset or headphones while watching. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to be the first to see our weekly content that we upload every Friday. To get started, I must say, Resident Evil is a series that I hold very close to my heart. And if you missed our horrifying nostalgia episode, I recommend that you go back and watch that after you finish this video. Anyway, with that being said, I spent a lot of time playing the Resident Evil series. However, out of all the titles that have been released, I've played Resident Evil 2 the most. I'm not sure why, but this title has always been my favorite, and this stands to this day. This is not the first title to receive a remake. Back in 2002, the original survival horror received a quote-unquote remake for the GameCube. This remake would do little to change the formula, only updating the controls, adding a few extra rooms and enemies. But the original concept of the game was intact. It did get a major graphical update, however. So when a remake of Resident Evil 2 was announced in 2015, I could not have been more excited. In fact, I actually went back and dug out my old copy of the game, and yet again, I survived the horror. A few years later, during an E3 presentation, Capcom finally released the first look at the Resident Evil 2 remake, and it was not at all what I had expected. Gone were the fixed camera angles of the game's past, opting for an over-the-shoulder style similar to Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. I was baffled and, to be kind of honest, upset. However, I put my skepticism aside and I accepted the change, as long as they didn't change what made the game great: the police station, the puzzles, and the story. They did release a 30-minute playable demo, but I opted to wait for the final product. Well, January 2019 rolls around and the game releases. YouTube was flooded with videos of content covering Resident Evil 2. I turned to my favorite Let's Players and I watched the first couple hours of the game. The more I watched, the more frustrated I became. They had changed so much. The entire beginning of the game was different. I thought to myself, what happened to the back alleys, the basketball court, and where's the bus from the original title? Well, again, I pushed past my frustrations and continued to watch. The police station, while it looked familiar, was also different. The main hall was different, the puzzles had changed, items were in different locations, but again, I pushed past my feelings and kept watching until... the Tyrant, or Mr. X as some of you know him. And as I watched him follow the player from room to room, I thought to myself, no way. Mr. X was supposed to be like the nemesis from Resident Evil 3. He pops up occasionally, you fight him, take him down, and then you don't see him again for a while. But this new version of the same lumbering giant was never the same again. He just followed you everywhere. And that's when I decided I didn't want this new version. So I put it out of my mind until about 2 weeks ago. I was cycling through the Xbox game store when I realized Resident Evil 2 was on sale 50% off, and I finally broke down and purchased the game. While I expected sheer and utter disappointment, what came next was a bit of a surprise. So let's get on with the review portion of this video. So while we're reviewing the Resident Evil 2 Remake, I will be focusing on gameplay, visuals, and sound design. Let's get on with gameplay. So the basic foundation of Resident Evil is survival horror, and as the games progressed past the fourth installment of the series, turned into more of an action game with a touch of horror. I'm glad to say that Capcom has gotten back to its roots. As you make your way through the labyrinth that is the police station, you will need to hoard every single bullet that you get your hands on, as zombies are not so easy to take down, and when dropped, they often get back up again. The zombies are bullet sponges, and while shooting them in the head might get you a quick kill, it's not guaranteed. Similar to the third entry of the series, you'll find gunpowder scattered around that can be combined in various ways to make different types of ammo. One of the biggest allures of the original title for me was being able to comfortably explore a room after clearing it, slowly making your way around the room, looking over everything and exploring every nook and cranny, looking for hidden items and ammo. Well, when playing this title, it's best to only take out zombies that occupy the main hallways, as most of the rooms will only be visited once, maybe twice. Also, you will find wooden barricades that can be placed on windows that permanently keep zombies from entering through them. These will need to be strategically placed in areas that you will be passing through frequently, as placing them in the wrong areas will hurt you later on in the game. The layout of the police station slightly changed as well. While this initially bothered me, I found the reason for this later on. The layout of the puzzles changed as well, and some new puzzles have been added in. There were some puzzles that were excluded, like the statue puzzle. Now I would like to have seen some of these puzzles return from the original title. After getting my hands on it, I see why they've changed so much. If they would have kept everything from the original, a lot of the horror elements would have been lost. Players that played the 1998 version would have known exactly where to go and how to solve all the puzzles, and all of the jump scares would have been lost as well. I can honestly say that after playing, I am truly glad for most of the changes. Having more difficult zombies forces you to move around them and keeps the threat always present, making you memorize the hallways that have zombies in them, and this will be more evident when you finally face Mr. X. Hey guys, quick reminder, don't forget to hit that like button as it helps us reach a broader audience and grow our community, and we really appreciate it. At some point, Mr. X will rear his ugly fedora-wearing head. Your first instinct will be to pump him full of lead or just beeline it out of the room. Running is your best option as you cannot actually kill Mr. X. You can stun him after a few rounds to the face, but it's not worth the ammo that you will need to save for the end of the game. Like I had stated earlier in this video, Mr. X will follow you throughout the station. However, there are a few rooms he cannot enter, and these are far and few between. Like I had talked about moments ago, knowing what halls and rooms have zombies and where they are will be at the top of your list when planning your way through this maze. And with that being said, you'll be planning quite a bit, but being sure that you have multiple ways out of a room will be crucial when Mr. X arrives, as you may have to enter a room from a secondary entry if he is blocking the first. This is where you will notice a necessary need for change in the map design. As far as Mr. X goes, at first, I did find him to be an annoyance, but as soon as I found myself getting used to him, he disappears for a while before returning later in the game. Most of the puzzles, while not difficult, will have you backtracking your way through the station. Like I mentioned earlier, I do wish more of the puzzles from the original would have made their way into this title. However, every puzzle is technically here, but is presented in a different way, pushing onto boss fights. Most of these, while intense at first, are pretty repetitive. While some require slight puzzle mechanics, most of these are find the weak point, fill it with lead while avoiding getting hit. Now, if you're familiar with the original title, in the 1998 version, in order to get the full story, you must finish the game as one of the two playable characters, then save the game, remove the disc from the PlayStation 1, replacing it with the other character's disc, then load the finished saved game, and this will play out the actual second part of the story. The same goes for the remake. If you play the two scenarios without finishing the game, you'll most likely get the same playthrough without much variation in story. Just like the original, you must beat the first playthrough, then you get the option to play the second scenario and get the true ending. But this goes a step further. To get the final ending for both characters, you will actually need to beat the game 4 separate times. Each scenario, while similar, will offer some different story portions. Most of the puzzles will be the same, however, will offer some new locations that can be accessed after finishing the first scenario. So for those of you that were worried, like I was, about the missing parts in the beginning of the game, like Kendo's gun shop and the back alleys, fret not. These areas are present in the game, just not where you would remember them. When I finally stumbled across these locations, I was overtaken with nostalgia. I would complain, however, about the lack of interaction between our two heroes, Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. Other than the beginning of the game and one other scene in the game, these two never run across each other until the very end. Let's move on to visuals. To be expected, the overall presentation is stunning compared to the original, that's 21 years old. While the graphics did receive an update, it still retains the 90s feel. You will still notice payphones and old computers with their white, boxy monitors. The zombies look fantastic, but still keeps their stiff animation from the game's past. For those that played the original, I must say that you will be pleased with the return to the station and see everything in the third dimension. The major complaint that I would have is how reflective everything is. The game uses a technology that adds realism and reflectiveness to certain surfaces. While this looks great, when too many of the reflective surfaces are put in a small area, it ends up everything looking blurry and eye straining. You can pick up different outfits when playing the game. Some have to be purchased from the store, and others can be unlocked as you play the game, such as the original outfits from the 1998 version. And if that's not nostalgic enough for you, you can head over to the game store and download an HD version of the original character models. The last complaint that I guess would fall under the visual category would be the story cutscenes, as I feel the original did so much better. For some reason, I feel that most of the story cutscenes fall short compared to its predecessor. The story prologue scene from the original game has been removed and no longer explains what happened prior to starting the game.
Son of a...
Let's talk audio. The zombies sound great and will moan and scream occasionally when making their way down the tight corridors of the halls. The overall sound presentation is very impressive, like the lumbering footsteps from Mr. X in the next room or the growl from the liquor hanging from the ceiling. The biggest downfall is the soundtrack. The game's background music is virtually not present except for the occasional quick melody that gives a slight nod to the 1998 classic. Most of the time you will be playing in virtual silence except for the creature noises that remind you that you're not alone in the sound of your own footsteps. Now, I'm not a big fan of microtransactions, but for only a couple of dollars you can purchase the original soundtrack, in which you can then turn on while playing the game. Not only did it bring me back to my childhood while listening to these strange melodies, but it also added a new layer of fear. Moving through the dark hallways while an ominous music track plays out makes the experience almost perfect. We'll also activate the original menu sounds, mix that with the classic character models in the soundtrack, and you're off on a creepy but nostalgic horror survival adventure. To wrap things up, before I got my hands on this title, I didn't think it would live up to the original, but after playing a revised version of the game that I loved when I was young, I can honestly say that I could not be happier with this rendition of a classic game. If you have yet to pick up this title because of the same skepticism that I had, fear not, it's time to pick your copy up. Funny thing is, the Resident Evil 3 Remake was announced the same day that I purchased this title, and after finally working up the courage and getting over my original fears, I could not be more excited to get my hands on the Resident Evil 3 Remake. For those waiting for the release of Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 3 will be releasing on April 3rd, 2020. A final complaint though, before we wrap up, is the fact that Raccoon City is so large, as the original concept for Raccoon City was that it was a small Midwestern town. Now, I want to know, would you pick this title up? Have you played this game? And if so, what did you think of it? If you enjoyed it, let me know why. If you hated this remake, I also want to know why. And lastly, are you excited for the Resident Evil 3 remake? Let us know down in the comments below. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button as it helps us reach a broader audience and we really appreciate it. Also, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to be the first to see our weekly content that we upload every Friday. You can also follow us on Twitter by clicking the link down in the description below. Until next time, this is Obi, signing out. See you guys next time.